The bullet had already left the barrel by the time anyone screamed, and in 4 minutes, a 26-year-old waitress with trembling hands would do something that made a decorated Navy SEAL open his eyes again, something that would later bring 2 federal agents to her apartment door, asking a question she never expected to answer. "Where did you learn that?" Her name was Mara Ellison, and before that morning, nobody in the small diner off Route 9 knew her as anything more than the quiet girl who refilled coffee cups and remembered how everyone liked their eggs. She had moved to that town 2 years earlier with nothing but a duffel bag and a past she never spoke of. She worked double shifts, kept her head down, and smiled the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The regulars liked her because she was gentle, efficient, and never asked questions. They had no idea that gentleness was something she had built, brick by brick, over the wreckage of a life she'd left behind. That morning started like any other. The bell above the diner door chimed at 7:15, and a group of off-duty servicemen walked in, laughing, loud, alive with the kind of easy confidence that comes from having survived things ordinary people never see. Among them was a man named Jonah Reyes, a Navy SEAL home on leave, broad-shouldered and sunburned, with a laugh that filled the whole room. Mara poured his coffee and he thanked her with a nod, never knowing her name, never knowing that in less than an hour, his life would be in her hands. It happened fast, the way tragedy always does. Jonah stood to leave a tip on the counter, and midway through reaching for his wallet, he stopped. His face changed, not pain exactly, but confusion, like his body had suddenly forgotten how to work. Then he collapsed, his head striking the edge of a booth on the way down. The diner erupted into chaos. Someone screamed for help. Someone else fumbled for a phone. The other servicemen, trained for war zones and combat wounds, stood frozen, because this was different, this was their friend, in a diner, dying in front of them, and there was no enemy to fight, only a body that had stopped cooperating. Mara didn't scream. She didn't freeze. Something inside her, something old and buried, snapped into place like a key finding its lock. She was on her knees beside him before anyone else moved, 2 fingers pressed to his neck, her voice low and steady as she called out for someone to note the time. She tilted his head, cleared his airway, and when she found no breath, no pulse, her hands were already moving, 30 compressions, deep and rhythmic, her whole body weight behind them, sweat breaking across her forehead as she counted under her breath like it was a prayer she'd said 1,000 times before. The servicemen around her, men who had faced gunfire without blinking, watched in stunned silence as this soft-spoken waitress worked on their friend with a precision that looked less like instinct and more like memory. She was not guessing. She was not panicking. She moved like someone who had done this before, in a place far more dangerous than a diner, under circumstances far more desperate than a cup of coffee gone cold. 4 minutes. That is how long it took. 4 minutes of compressions, of 2 rescue breaths that made his chest rise, of her voice cutting through the panic to keep the room from collapsing into hysteria, of her refusing to stop even when her arms burned and her knees ached against the hard floor. And then, on the edge of the 4th minute, Jonah Reyes gasped. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, terrified, alive. The diner exploded into sound again, this time relief instead of horror, and Mara sat back on her heels, breathing hard, her hands shaking now that the work was done, as though her body only allowed itself to feel fear after the danger had passed. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet heroes who never ask for a name in the credits, take a moment right now to like this video, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, share it with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Midnight Tales so you never miss a story like this one. The paramedics arrived 11 minutes later and were stunned to find a fully revived patient with a steady pulse, something they later admitted rarely happens without advanced equipment and trained personnel. Jonah Reyes was rushed to the hospital, stabilized, and would go on to make a full recovery, but the story of the waitress who saved him didn't end there. It was only beginning. Word spread through the small town first, then further, as one of the servicemen posted online about the woman who had saved his friend's life with nothing but her bare hands and an unshakable calm. News vans appeared outside the diner. Reporters asked Mara where she'd trained, and she gave vague, polite answers about a first aid class she barely remembered. But the questions didn't stop, because something about her technique had caught the attention of people far more observant than local journalists. The specific rhythm of her compressions, the exact angle of her airway clearance, the way she had called out timestamps like a triage report, these were not the marks of a weekend CPR certification. These were the marks of specialized training, the kind reserved for combat medics and elite emergency responders. 2 weeks later, a black sedan pulled up outside her apartment building, and 2 agents from the FBI knocked on her door, polite but unmistakably serious. They didn't accuse her of anything. They simply asked to talk. Sitting across from her at her small kitchen table, one of them finally asked the question that had brought them there: "Where did you learn to do that?" Not the standard course. Not the standard technique. Something else, something they recognized from military field reports. Mara sat quietly for a long moment, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold, and for the first time in 2 years, she let herself remember out loud. She told them about the years before the diner, about a life spent as a combat medic overseas, about the friends she had saved and the ones she couldn't, about the weight that followed her home and the reason she had buried that part of herself so deep she almost believed it was gone. She told them about the guilt that made her leave that world behind, convinced she wasn't strong enough to carry it anymore, only to discover, kneeling on a diner floor with a stranger's life in her hands, that the skill had never left her, only the confidence had, and now, slowly, that too was coming back. The agents didn't take her away. They didn't put her in handcuffs. They simply thanked her, told her that her instincts had likely saved a decorated serviceman's life, and left her with a quiet respect that spoke louder than any medal. Jonah Reyes, once he recovered, tracked her down himself, not as an agent or an officer, but simply as a man who owed his life to a woman who thought her past was something to hide rather than something that had prepared her, all along, for the one moment that mattered most. Mara still works at that diner today, though the regulars look at her differently now, with a kind of quiet awe reserved for people who turn out to be more than they ever let on. She still pours coffee, still remembers how everyone likes their eggs, but she no longer buries the woman she used to be. Instead, she carries her, gently, the way you carry someone you finally forgave. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that the quietest people around you might be carrying the loudest kind of courage, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment below. We read every single one, and your words mean more than you know. And before you go, we have one small request. Type the word courage in the comments if you believe that even our hardest chapters can prepare us for our greatest moments. Because somewhere out there, right now, someone is quietly carrying a skill, a strength, a piece of their past they think no one will ever need, until, one ordinary morning, in 4 extraordinary minutes, the world reminds them exactly why they were given it.